Good evening. It is Thursday, December 7th, and the approximate time is 6:11 p.m. And I call the City of Maple Plain Planning Commission meeting to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First order of business is are there any needs to add new business, or can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as it is written?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Okay,
I'll second that.
sounds good. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say the same. Hearing none, the ayes have it, 6-0. So next order of business, we need to think back, travel with me to the past of September 7th, 2023. We have to look through those meeting minutes and make sure they're in good order and approve them. Does anybody have any notes, comments, suggestions? Otherwise, I'll certainly take a motion to approve the minutes.
Well, my copy has all these question marks under,
The camp?
yeah, the paragraph that begins, the camp commented that. I'm not sure what that's all about. And Mardella's not here.
Yeah. I recognize that too.
I don't know if it just came out an audible or I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So
We can
she
have-
did vote to approve it.
We can approve with clarification, I mean, just cleaning that up,
Mhm.
that piece, if that's okay, or if there's something more that you want to see, we can bring it back.
Overall, I didn't see anything that was missed or needed to be added.
I'd make a motion to approve it, clearing up the decamp question marks.
Okay. Can I get a second motion?
I second it.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say the same. Hearing none, the ayes have it, 6-0. Moving right along, we are going to have a public hearing related to a interim use permit. And Mark, why don't you take it away, giving us the details.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Planning Commissioners. We've got an item that's coming before you tonight as an application for an interim use permit for use of an existing building as a small event center. The property itself is located at 5310 Main Street, and the applicant, Steep on Main LLC, has requested that the city consider allowing a use of that facility for small events to operate within the existing building. Their intent would be to host small private parties, receptions, music events, theater productions, and similar type events, noting that the maximum capacity of that facility is 75 persons. The property is located at the northeast corner of Main Street in Delano. There's an existing building that was historically used as a church on the subject properties. Let's see here. If I can get this up. Come on. Okay. Come on. Let's go. Sorry. It's not mirroring me. There we go. All right. So the subject property you can see is northeast corner of Delano and Maine. The property is zoned MUD, which is our mixed-use downtown zoning district, and it's also got about a comprehensive plan as mixed use. It's approximately 0.24 acres, or almost 15,000 square feet in overall size. So the city was approached by the new owners of the property several years ago, actually, about the possibility of using a portion of the existing building for a small event center. Noting that the owner's intent was to utilize the building primarily for the purpose of a music studio. It should be noted that kind of a music studio, recording studio, is a permitted use, but they wanted to add this other piece to that, which would be to occasionally host small events within the kind of upstairs portion, what was once the church portion, kind of the assembly portion of the church. And so we had several different conversations about what that looks like, how they could do that, and ultimately thought that it could come to the city as some sort of a conditional or interim use, noting that our mixed-use zoning district does provide several kind of land use categories as either permitted, conditional, or interim. But our ordinance also allows the city to consider interim uses on properties that are located within the mixed-use district for uses that are either allowed in other districts or similar to uses allowed within the MU zoning district. So I noted that within our zoning district, we do have some permitted uses that are somewhat similar. Activity center, it's a use, it's undescribed, undefined, but it could be one that could be considered similar. Art studio, interior, decorating studio, photographic studio, or music studio. That is what's being utilized in a portion of the building right now. And then I noted coffee shops, cigar bars, wine bars, or similar gathering spaces as kind of small venues, small event type gathering places. And then as conditional, we have theaters and convention halls. So with those ideas in mind, we thought that it would be best to come forward with a use that could be considered by the city as interim, not memorialized forever in that building, but one that could be defined with under the current ownership as they're proposing to utilize it, and could be considered then as an interim use. Interim uses are uses that have a set expiration date or a known date that the city can establish of when the use would stop. In this case, it could be permitted on a property, and something we've done in the past is until such time as the business stops operating on that premise or the business is sold or the property is sold. Any of those events would trigger then the interim use to be no longer approved. Now, with that said, somebody else could always come in and purchase property and then come to the city and ask for that permit as well. But this way it would not necessarily run with the land and be memorialized forever, noting that operators, how buildings are used, interior configurations, things like that all matter when we're considering these kind of special uses. So with that, the applicant did talk to the city. We visited the site to kind of look at it, walk through the building, take a look at what's been done. The building's been renovated. The bottom portion of the building is a full-fledged recording studio, and they've done things to the upstairs to make it accessible, to improve it, and to also help to soundproof it. So that they can do performances in the upstairs area, and have some mitigation of the sound. When you walk in the building, coming in off of Main Street, there is a kind of vestibule area that is essentially like a split level landing, and you can walk from that downstairs into the kind of recording area, lounge area that they have set up, or you can walk upstairs into what would be the event room. And so from that staging area, kind of from where you walk in, I mean, you have that option, go up or down. They have provided a accessible lift that would take people from that area now and make that building accessible to the first floor, so that you could get into what they're calling the kind of event room. My screen is projected. Anybody a great iPad user? So I can't see my presentation. Where is it? I was gonna flip screens, but it doesn't, for whatever reason, want to do that. All right. I want to just grab the floor plan on the screen here. And for whatever reason, it doesn't like me today. Now I got it. Okay, so this is a floor plan, lower floor plan. You can see the vestibule on the left as you walk in. Here is a vestibule. You can go downstairs to, this is where the recording studio is. There's also break room, storage room in the back, as well as bathroom facilities. If you go to the upstairs, or what would be the main floor, primarily the area that would hold the small events. As you come into the vestibule, you can go upstairs or use the lift, and then you come into kind of the nave of the church, or what used to be that. And you have an area that's just open, it's vaulted. They've shown a configuration. This isn't the configuration necessarily, but a configuration that shows how you could have tables, and then they have a stage area that has been set up in this part of the church before, kind of in the similar configuration to the church. There's a kind of auxiliary or staging room in the back, and then accessible restroom, and then storage. So it gives you just a real high-level overview of what that event room would look like. This layout has about 35 spaces or 35 seats shown, and then still a considerable stage area that's on the north side or north end of the event room. And so when we looked at this type of use as it relates to other uses we have in the downtown MUD district, or we looked at how it related to either historical use or now what's there, we looked at a couple of things. One, obviously, as a church, there was an assembly and gathering space that was permitted and allowed as a part of that use. It could hold small events, weddings, funerals, those types of celebrations often occurred in the basement of those facilities, and then they would have their services in the main part of the church. With that, we looked at what would this particular use do as it related to assembly of people, and then also to kind of the surrounding properties in the downtown as a whole, looking at what is the parking impact, what is the potential impact to surrounding properties from this type of use versus other types of permitted uses. So initially when we looked at the use, our focus kind of was on a couple of things. One was parking. How would you park this building? Would there be a need to have any off-site or off-street parking? And we talked quite a bit about that. What the applicant is proposing is to park in two different ways. One is to utilize on-street parking. And they noted that on Main Street, up against the railroad tracks on the south side, there are no houses, there are no other businesses. And so there is a availability of parking. I'm sure the church often utilizes that as well. And they demonstrated by aerial photograph, you can see actual cars, and they just show how cars park on that street that is permitted parking. And so they demonstrated that they can park somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 cars really right in front of their property. and or adjacent on Main Street, not necessarily utilizing or occupying kind of other people's frontage for on-street parking. The second thing they did is they went to the property owner located directly south, which is this owner here, and they obtained a parking agreement that would allow them to park cars on that property for events. And so with that additional parking, they're showing 9 spaces or so on that parking area. I think there's, potentially that could be a few more depending on how you parked it and how you manage the parking of that. But with that, we don't necessarily have small event center as a use within our zoning ordinance for the purpose of determining a parking demand. So then it falls on the city's Planning Commission and Council to determine parking demand. I looked at a lot of different reference points to try to just get a sense, but also to just kind of reasonably assume what parking might be. And I went with a more conservative parking approach on the parking requirement. So the building's limited to 75 occupants. That's a architectural determined occupancy load under the building code, and then that follows through or carries through for fire and that type of thing. So there is a hard number that building can legally have as occupants. So with that in mind, the number of parking spaces for an assembly type use, small event type use, restaurant type use, bar type use ranges from somewhere about 1 space for every 2.5 occupants to 1 space for every 4 occupants. You can break down churches by certain number of inches on a bench, or you can break down restaurant or other seating areas or assembly areas by actual chairs or seats you can get. But I thought 1 to 2.5 I think it's a good number. I think it's a strong number, but I think that's on the high end of what parking demand would be. So with that would generate a demand for 30 parking spaces. And I think that's a really good number. I think if you were to hold a small wedding, a small anniversary party, some sort of a theater production, you could easily get that 1 to 2.5 ratio. So 2.5 people basically in a car, right, on average. And so I think with 30 spaces and what they're showing with that off-street parking agreement they have across the street, that seems to make some sense. And I think they can demonstrate how they could park that off-street. The other thing I'll note is they do have a private driveway behind this building or to the north side of this building. They can easily park 3, 4, 5 cars in that private driveway. It actually goes back. I would anticipate that could be utilized not necessarily for attendee parking, but for worker parking, catering parking, the owner parking, if they're operating that. And that does provide you even a little extra buffer of off-street parking without really having them change or manipulate that parking area behind. We looked at, it's wide enough for a couple cars, but if you start to try to formalize parking with parking dimensions, it gets tight if you were going to try to do something more. So with that in mind, we looked at parking and then this off-street agreement. I think, we included a copy of that for Planning Commission and Council. We'd want to make sure that's formalized enough that it does actually run with the building and can become a condition of the approval that they maintain that agreement. The city in parking also recommended that we provide 2 accessible or dedicated accessible spaces, and so the applicant has agreed that they would do that. And where we would do that is in front of the building where the sidewalk comes out, seems to be the most logical. They noted that they would work with the city to put in the proper ramp to be able to provide access. And then we as a city could allow them to sign those spaces. It's fairly typical that cities can allow accessible spaces to be on-street parking like that so that they're in front of a business. And I think that's a good solution to providing accessible spaces. Looking if you were trying to do that on the back side or the north side of the building, then get people all the way around to where the lift is, it adds a whole nother level of complexity, new sidewalks, new requirements. And I think this is the most direct route to the front door and to that lift area. But that would be something that would need to be part of the condition. And if anybody looked at that, or if anybody knows that the city's talking about Main Street as a possible redo, the curb and the pavement out there, it's a really low curb right now because the pavement's really high on that. So taking out a couple sections, getting that ramped up, there's really not a lot of elevation change there. So it actually is pretty conducive to the idea of getting a ramp in there. Couple of other considerations that I noted in the report. The applicant is not proposing to prepare food on site. There would be the option they could cater food, so that all food and drink would have to be catered to the property and would be subject to other standards that the city has or licensure that the city has for that type of use. All events would be subject to the current hours of operation and noise limitations for any location within the city. I noted that we currently have noise requirements related to any use that would exceed certain noise levels between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. So that's just to note, that's citywide, but they would be subject obviously to that. We do have special event permitting. We have a process for special event permitting. We've talked about this with the Iron Exchange. I would reiterate it with this. We're not by this use permitting special events. So if they were to want to hold a special event that would seek to exceed noise levels or seek to exceed hours, they would be subject to that process. They could come in, they could apply, city council could review it, and then consider special event permits on an individual basis. That is something that the city can do. But just like any of our other bars or our restaurants or anything like that, there's not this approval doesn't by right give them any special events outside of what the conditions are that they're asking. I did talk to West Hennepin, and obviously I've talked to the city because I'm unaware. I have not heard of any issues. The applicants have been doing a recording studio in this building for a couple of years now, and they have had musical production or music bands playing in the main level. And the city is unaware of any complaints. West Hennepin did not have any complaints related to noise or anything like that. So I just want to note that because that's important, noting that they are operating under permitted use as a music studio, and they do play in that upstairs, the nave of the church. And so with that, they are haven't had any complaints. We also talked about use of the outside part of the site. The applicant said at some point maybe they would want to develop some other space outside for seating or something like that. We noted that at this time we wouldn't be considering approval of outdoor use. So if they were to have an event, it would have to be held indoors. Obviously, people can walk in and out of the building, but if there was congregation or loitering or anything that started to move outside, that wouldn't be part of what we're approving as kind of a permitted. If they wanted to come back in the future and create an outdoor space that would allow for kind of cross access or something like that, that's something we could definitely consider at a future date. This wouldn't limit them though from, say, putting in a small like bench and seating area or something outside where people could go sit, but the activity couldn't utilize that as kind of an indoor outdoor type of use as a part of this interim use. The applicant did note that the primary use of the building is their recording studio. This is supplemental, that what they're proposing now. They'd like to have the opportunity to have additional income or revenue generating uses. They noted that the building's set up well for this type of use. Used to be a church, which is a kind of production or assembly type area. And so with that, they think this is kind of a good supplemental or subordinate use to their primary use, which is the music recording studio. If anybody's been out there, they are trying to maintain the kind of historical architecture that's there. They've upgraded, kind of cleaned up that building. And if anybody can go inside, you could also see some of those improvements that have carried on inside. With that, the criteria for granting conditional use and interim use are kind of somewhat interchangeable when we look at that. And so the city, when we're looking at something like this, we look at what is the potential that the use that's being proposed, in this case interim, would be, it would not kind of impact or negatively affect the reasonable use and enjoyment of surrounding properties. That's how I always kind of look at it. And so if there is impacts that could occur, does the applicant adequately mitigate those impacts, or are there not enough impacts that take away reasonable use and enjoyment? If that's the case, then you could consider an interim use. The reason for the interim use, again, is so that the use isn't memorialized. The city would have some additional controls relating to interim uses. That then also we'd have a certain date that the interim use would no longer be permitted, so it doesn't just memorialize. These types of small event uses can widely vary, and I think depending on the operators and how they're managed, they can be really positive, or you could have other potential issues. With that said, looking at the surrounding properties, the property that is directly across the street to the west, that is a landscape company, so it really operates as a commercial business. The property to the south, which was a longtime garage, is a commercial property. Now, this is a residential rental property, and then there's additional residential here. The property to the north is also commercial property. So there's a mix here, but it's been a church. It's been located in that area, obviously, historically. And the city's downtown, this MUD, is a mixed district. We do have some remnant kind of single-family residential. We have some rental multifamily properties, but we also have some somewhat heavy commercial users in this part of the city as well. The other thing I would note is the railroad is across the street, really, for all intensive purposes, and then this whole area here has obviously no use up against the railroad. With that, happy to answer questions. The applicants are here. We have a public hearing on this as well, and yield for that.
With that, I'd like to open the public hearing. The current time is 6:37. And applicant being here, why don't you come up, introduce yourself, tell us where you live, and give us some insight.
I'm going to start by giving you guys all my cards so that you guys can get a hold of us if there's any questions or anything. Did I
I got one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And by all, I think I got
Yep.
you already. By all means, and you are.
Yeah, I get
you. Any questions or anything, I'm always available. We've been, I think Mark really covered it really well. Like there's very little that we discussed or that we even thought about that he hasn't already covered in this presentation. There's a couple of minor things that I kind of, just in listening to him, wanted to clarify. Well, first I'll start off with who I am. My name's Mike Birnbach. My name's on that card. I've been the house recording engineer down at First Avenue main room for the last almost 20 years. So I've been a professional recording engineer for all of that time. And I outgrew my studio in St. Paul and started shopping around and found this little church, which was the absolute perfect place to put a studio. So that's how we ended up there. But part of our plan right from the start was to try and make this also an event venue that, I don't know if you guys are aware, but recording is it's not the glory industry it was, right? A lot of people record now at home or whatever and stuff like that. So offering a facility like this is exceptional in the business. And it's also not the moneymaker it was. It's not, we're not making the kind of money that Columbia Records was making in the 80s. So having something to supplement the income of the studio is important to us. And this, honestly, we're looking at it as a crucial thing to us, whether we can support this business. It's also, in our view, one of the few things that this building is really useful for. The place was built in 1871. It's historical. As he noted, we're keeping it up with that historical look and, in fact, improving it and sticking with that historical concept because that's important to us as well. And being stewards of the community is important to us. The couple of things that came up that I wanted to clarify a little bit was, one is that we're using it as a music studio now, which is frankly a lot louder than a private party would be. You know, we use the facility for recording drum tracks, rock and roll bands. If you're familiar with First Avenue main room, it's loud music is the kind of stuff I work with, and we've taken great steps to mitigate that. And I think that can be proven by the fact that there's been no complaints over the last 2 years, and I've had, you know, hard-hitting rock and roll bands in there. And so I believe that we've already addressed the vast majority of any issues that could come up, but we are definitely committed to addressing any additional. And the one house that you can see in that picture right now off to the side is really the only residential house that's right next to us. And I would encourage you guys to talk to him. Tim, I forget his last name right off the top of my head, I apologize. But I think he would tell you that we've done, when we first moved in there, we started doing some stuff up there. He had some issues with sound. We baffled windows. We put up sound deadening curtains and the whole 9 yards to make sure that we're not bothering our neighbors, because we don't want to be bothering our neighbors as a matter of principle, not even just as a matter of this, right? It's just being good neighbors is important to us. So I would encourage anybody to talk to him, or even I encourage you all to come out and look at the place. I think we took it from being kind of just sitting there for many, many years and have done some great improvements to it. Everybody who comes out to see the place loves the place, and like our return customers is virtually 100% with the recording studio thing. But I do think it's crucial to us to have an additional source of income off of this property. And other than that, just that we also, in the course of this, support other businesses near us. There's a music store that's literally like 4 doors down from us. We've sent them countless customers. McGarry's Bar, which James was going to be here, but he's apparently not. But they want to work with us on doing things where, in example, they have a birthday party coming up in the middle of this month that they approached us about that we're not able to accept because we haven't approved this thing. But they wanted to have a birthday party over there where they would cater the food, they would handle the bar license stuff, and we would just provide a venue so that McGarry's wouldn't have to shut down their venue in order to have this event. I think McGarry's is excited about that. I've also talked with the owner of Iron Exchange, and I can't remember his name right off, but yeah, very similar input from him that they might very well have things. And I think we covered the fact that we wouldn't be preparing food there. And yeah, I think I'm really impressed with your presentation, frankly. Like that you really covered all the bases. And that's what I was most nervous about, was that not knowing all of that. But I encourage any questions from any of you guys, and I absolutely encourage everybody. I encourage you to encourage friends to come over and see the place, because I think in seeing it, I think you'd see how fitting this really is for the little neighborhood that it's in, and I don't foresee any problems in having operated a business that's I would have to say substantially louder than your typical private party would be. That I don't think we're going to run into noise problems, and I feel like we've conquered the parking problems. So that's kind of my input on it. I don't know, perhaps Brian has something to say. Brian's one of the partners in the business. Dave is also a partner in the business, and he wasn't able to join us today because he has other business out of state. But and then Jack is here as well. I don't know if you had anything to say. He sold us the property.
Brian Owner, I'm here to support Michael. Was the prior owner of the building. My wife couldn't be here tonight because she's been ill, but she had an import-export business out of that church. We loved the church. We loved the history of it, tried to maintain that. But it was basically an office with a warehouse. This is so much cooler. And it gives a life to the city that it needs. The city really needs some life. And I always thought, this is downtown Maple Plain, but there's nothing happening. You got McGarry's, you got a few other businesses, but this is really cool, and I hope you approve it.
Not gonna lie, the last thing I would have thought was it was a music recording studio. No. So, yeah. But it's perfect. It's perfect use.
How busy are you downstairs? How active on
Getting
a,
busier. So I left my.
Mike, why don't you come up to the, yeah, thanks.
I left my old studio in St. Paul 2 years ago to move into this. So I took a little hiatus while we fixed it up. I also used to be a contractor, state of Minnesota contractor, so had a lot of experience with building and knew what I was getting into when I got into it. So I spent the first almost full year just fixing the place up, and during that full year I was really only taking clients that I had already had that were like people I didn't want to lose. So it's been a little over 6 months now that we've been truly open and advertising, and I felt like the place is presentable enough and everything is done enough that we can do efficient recordings there and stuff. So over the last 6 months, business has been steadily improving, but it is not the kind of business it was 25, 30 years ago as far as, you know, it's not, the options are now vast in that regard. So what we need to offer people is something special. So, and I think we have that here. That's why we bought the place. Currently, I would say I'm probably doing 3 to 5 gigs a week out of the place. And then I also do pro audio. Outside of that, I work down at First Avenue, so I do, you know, gigs down there, and some of that work comes home with me, but not in the form of bands. And a lot of the studio work is not in the form of bands. You get a band in and you record, and then you spend a lot of time going over those recordings and mixing them and fixing them and whatever. So there's a lot of studio time that is not loud. But when the studio is operating, it's a, you know, it's definitely a loud environment. But business has been steadily picking up, and as I noted earlier, like everybody who comes out comes back. I don't think the only clients that I haven't had return is only because they were in 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago and they haven't had time to return. It's been, I've had really good feedback on the place, and I've been working with really great artists. With First Avenue, I've worked with 5 Grammy winners. I've got all of the biggest bands in the Twin Cities I've worked with at one point or another, but not necessarily in my studio. So I see business increasing, but that's kind of where it's at. What I call it right now when people ask me how we're doing, I say we're treading water.
yeah, that sounds like you're doing great.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like we're doing great treading water at 2 years in business, because especially given that the first year was not business. And yeah, we spent a year hemorrhaging money just making sure that this place got up to be what it needed to be in order to attract who we needed to attract.
Perfect, thank
Yeah.
you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so your recording studio's in the basement, and that's where you've done a lot of the sound attenuation, right,
We've done it both,
You've done both.
because we use both floors for the recording studio. To say the recording studio is primarily in the basement is the control room and the bulk of the gear is in the basement, but when we want to track drums and get that drum sound of a big room, we bring it up to the big room and we do it up there. Same with if we have a large band. So the largest and the loudest of the stuff that we've done has always been in what we call the sanctuary, which is the upstairs room. And as a result, well, I have a great relationship with my one neighbor because I find it crucial. I think it's very important that not only we don't cause problems for him, but that he doesn't bring any problems to you guys. So I did get a complaint from him at one point saying, hey, you know, it seems loud to me. We went through and built buffers for the windows that are removable, so we can put buffers in the windows whenever there's a band up in there, and I haven't heard a peep out of him since. So I think we've conquered it. You know, being a sound professional, I've walked around the property with a dB meter and checked all around. I could, for one thing, it doesn't even compare to the train coming by, which happens on a regular basis,
you probably
and interrupts.
stop
It does.
recording at
It
that
interrupts
point,
our
right?
recording sessions here and there, but and nor would I make the claim that we should be able to be as loud as the train. Like that's, you know, the train zips by and it's gone, and I'll have a recording session there for 4 hours or something. But I've walked around the property with a dB meter, and the Highway 12 is often louder. Anything behind the building, Highway 12 is louder than the loudest of bands I could have in there. And that's not to say Highway 12 is even that loud. We've dampened the room enough, and there's enough building between that and the back of the property that it's almost indistinguishable. Now, when you get in that little cove area where the 2 walls kind of meet it gets a little louder in there, but still, I've never recorded anything above like 68 dB, which is not, I don't know how familiar you guys are with dB and whatnot, but it's not terribly loud. Oftentimes, if it, anything aside from a kick drum, is you're walking in the yard is louder than that. So, you know, it's quieter than typical animals and things like that. But and I would encourage you guys, if you want to, I either put together some videos of bands in there and dB meters and all of that, if that's important to you guys, or you're welcome to come by. I would let you know sometime when we have a band in there. And we do all kinds of recording. I had a 23-piece a cappella group in there last week. So, and they don't make a lot of noise at all, right? And when they do, nobody really bothers with it because, you know, it's actually quite fitting for the church.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Another question I have is on the hours. So our noise ordinances say, you know, quiet at 10 o'clock.
Yep.
I imagine if you have an event, that the event's probably going to want to go on longer than 10 o'clock.
I guess I'm not positive on that.
Okay.
We are certainly willing to curtail things to whatever limit we have to, because this is important to us to have this approval. But currently, I run recording sessions till all hours of the night, and I don't get any complaints. And as a result of the mitigation that we've taken, I believe. The one side of the building, it's noticeable. When you go to the one side of the building that we mitigated, because it's pointing at one of our neighbors, it's considerably quieter than the other side, which doesn't matter because it's a business and nobody's there at those hours. Which is another thing to consider, is that the business that's right across the street from us would almost never be in business hours where they would have parking people there while we were also having.
So nobody lives there? It looks like a house.
No, it does look like it's two
It's
houses.
a landscape company.
Yeah, it used to be two houses and they've turned it into a landscape company.
The house across from you is basically used for storage.
Yeah.
For the landscape. So no, nobody's living there.
Right.
And the current, last I looked at it, the current lease was that they could not live there. And they could, the lease was set so that it could not live there.
Yeah.
But my issue is the parking, and the first 10 parts that you have listed as parking, the first 10 spots are actually used by the landscape company.
Yep.
During the summer,
I
Monday
agree.
through Friday.
Yep. Till about 3
And there
o'clock.
are others that are using some of that
Yep.
parking. And then if you get you have a capacity of 75, you don't have a lot of parking there. And if these are events that bring in any alcohol, you're releasing people into the neighborhood. And my concern is the limited of the parking that you have.
I think it's a valid concern.
Yep.
There's one thing that, you know, kind of universally, the three of us partners in it don't want, and that is to convert some of our green space into more pavement. And, you know, I guess, I feel, do you live right in that area? Is that?
I own 53. I live within a block.
Okay.
Before you go too far, Miss, can you come up to the podium and introduce yourself and tell us where you live?
I am Kathy Archer. I own the 5354 East Main Street, the apartment building there.
Okay, thank you.
I am there at all hours of the day and night.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
That was something too that we had made note of and note of to Mark, is that our parking would not be primarily at the same time that the landscaping parking is. So hopefully that alleviates some of your concern. And I believe that given that whole stretch along the railroad track there of no houses and whatnot, I feel like there's adequate parking. If you have concerns, by all means, we would want to address them.
You're gonna say, how big of events are you gonna have? If you're having 20 people there, not a problem.
We already have 20 people there, because we do things like video shoots and band promo stuff and stuff like that too, and rehearsals. So there's been points already where we've had 20 musicians, larger bands in there to do performances and whatnot. Obviously, everybody wants to park as close as they can, so that's a good thing for you, because that means that the first places that get picked up are all the little spots right around our property, And then also, hopefully, you're aware of JV's Best, the garage.
I was aware
thing.
of that, I was not aware that you had an agreement.
Yeah, right, and that's why we did that, because again, that's gonna be literally right across the street, it's gonna be the parking people want. So I believe that parking will fill up first, and occasionally there will be some spillover into your neighborhood, into, I guess it's our neighborhood. So, but absolutely, that's a concern of ours, and I don't think, we're willing to address it and deal with it. And if it becomes a problem, as opposed to, if we look at it and wow, it turns out that it's everybody's driving in their own car, and now you got 70 cars in the neighborhood.
That's what
Right,
I'm saying.
yeah. I don't think that small parties and weddings and things like that, I do believe that most people are inclined to kind of carpool to those things. But I don't have a lot of experience in that. I do have a lot of experience in the showbiz business and whatnot, but it's not in that aspect of it. So.
Parking like on the street too.
Indeed, right. Something that wasn't mentioned at all is there is a public parking lot between us and McGarry's.
Mhm.
That is, it's a gravel lot. And,
Yep.
Mark has definitely made some concerns about whether that'll always be there, and I don't think it probably will always be there. But it is something that can help to mitigate it for now, and if we're experiencing any issues. I think that people are far more inclined to carpool to a private party or a wedding or something like that than they are to a band rehearsal. And so I like to think that we've got that under control, but I don't know how you know that without actually having some events there.
In regards to parking, Mark, do you know, is the street wide enough to maybe accommodate angled parking anywhere?
It's a wide street.
It's a very
Is
wide
it
street.
is it wide enough to accommodate? It's not really set up to accommodate it today.
Not today, but
That's something
is it
that
wide enough to
One side.
accommodate? with-
it's something
Oh,
that
for
the
sure.
city could look at. I mean, they're going to look at angled parking on, city. We're going to look at angled parking on Main between Maple and Bud as a part of our downtown
And they are the
redevelopment.
same width, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
but
was thinking that stretch along the railroad tracks would be, angled parking
Right.
along there would be, would work
well,
well.
and I mean, I want to say the JJV's lot. I don't know. I mean, that used to be an auto body, and there was.
What is it
Yeah.
now?
It's a what do they sell?
Marine, they do,
Canopies or something like that, right?
oh, I don't think so. I think they do marine, like
Covers?
boat maintenance, and like they prep boats
Store.
for the summer,
Yeah.
and then they prep them again for the
Okay.
winter,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
It's
So
not
they-
it's not as high intensity as the auto garage or the auto
And
repair
very
that was
low
there.
business.
So if you drive by there, it's pretty reflective. There's not a lot outside.
Usually there'll be like 1 or 2 boats on a trailer parked out there.
Yeah, I feel like you get,
But I think
More
10,
cars.
10 to 15 is what that lot does accommodate, especially for private events or things like that. But
well, and just down the street too, like where, Little Munchkins is, that, like,
Yeah.
cars aren't gonna be
Yep.
parked in front of there at night either, so like, I think,
Right, that's that whole little stretch
Yeah.
of business there, yeah.
Yeah.
There's the little gym and the Munchkins and the music store.
yeah,
And there's certainly opportunity to expand. We talked about reducing pavement and making green space pavement, but along that railroad there's plenty of opportunity to expand the roadway to make angle parking very feasible.
Is there, or is it, does it slope off to?
I mean, there is a slope off at some point, but I
It's-
think
yeah, there's a bit, for sure.
I'm not sure, I'm not a civil engineer by any means.
I just know there's a
So,
pretty good embankment there somewhere.
right.
Yeah.
There
Right,
is,
the-
and
the
we're
traffic
not, we wouldn't be
intersection.
relying on that. I think, I
Right.
mean, with the interim use, the controls we have is, we inspect annually. If it ever got to a point where parking became an issue, we could certainly
Mhm.
approach
Yeah.
the owner and say, your parking's not what
Yep.
you said it was, and we need to resolve that. And that's kind of, that's helpful with the interim use, because we can take it away, and then that use isn't permitted unless they cure. But to that point, I mean, there's a place in the downtown where there isn't a parking demand issue for kind of nighttime parking. It would be the stretch along the railroad,
Mhm.
right? Definitely during the day right now, this is a daytime picture, and you can see this is landscape
That's
companies
it.
parking. So you can see
They're-
the intensity of what they're doing. They're parking 20 cars on street right
They're
now.
pretty busy in the mornings, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Yeah.
They get done about 3 o'clock or 3:30,
Yeah.
and I can't imagine we'd have events starting earlier than that.
But if you go, you know, further to the west and you get to Marsh Avenue, between Marsh and Spring, you have the same unencumbered south side of the road, meaning that it's just up against railroad again. There's not a business that utilizes. So it's, you know, to walk 1 block or 2 blocks in the downtown is not abnormal. So I don't know. We're looking at a block. If you go another block, you've got the same. What is that? 12 cars, 13 cars.
Same with the road.
Same width, right?
Yeah, and I think just laying tables out in the space, like, I don't think you'll get much more than 50 seats, like, seated at tables in the space.
Yeah, you got seats for 35, you said.
With the stage, yeah.
Yeah, with the stage,
So I
and
just
you,
kinda-
you might be able to get
That
a
stage
little
is
bit better,
sectional and
but
can be put up in whatever amount we want, so.
Yes.
Yeah,
if you would lay these out without, you know, if you weren't doing kind of 4 tops and you did
yeah. you could-
longer tables or something, I think you're right. That's what I came up with, somewhere
yeah,
in that
I think it'd be
50-ish.
tough to get more than like 50, 55, like, without it being really tight.
Indeed, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
It looks like an exciting project. Question, you know, the building was built as a church, what, 1880s?
1871,
1871, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Um,
It was all updated in 98 with current plumbing, current electrical, and current
Yeah,
insulation.
Constitution was written in 1770, you know, only
Mhm.
100 years old.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And it's been dormant, and it's been used with a lot
It's
of
been
different things.
used, but
Are
not
we-
used as a.
I know, my
public
question
space.
is, really more for Mark maybe, are there any code issues that, it sounds like you've done a lot of things, if it's, whether it's fire protection or whether it's bathrooms to handle 70 people?
Yeah, I mean, the approval of this and the occupancy is going to be subject to the building inspector, you know, permitting that. Now, they permitted
Okay.
a lot of the improvements, but their architect prepared the occupancy
Okay.
based on what they're showing for
What's
the
there,
restrooms and that,
Code-wise
so,
and all that?
yeah.
Good.
It kind of appears that really the thing holding us at 75 occupants is the bathroom.
Mhm.
It appears they're willing to just cram people into a space.
Is it
you
a
know,
single
legally.
mixed, is it a mixed bathroom there?
It's a mixed bathroom,
Okay.
yep. And having only one bathroom, from what I understand, is the true limiting factor, that the room
Yeah.
would legally be allowed to hold more
Okay.
people if it weren't for that.
Yeah.
But I think, as was noted, nobody's gonna wanna rent the place for a party that's
Mhm.
too big for the place.
Mhm.
So, we're not gonna get 75 people seated at tables in that room.
Right.
It's not gonna happen.
But I would say that the architect, obviously, you're saying, has looked at it all for code issues. for
Yeah, and
emergency exits.
so their
to
architect
whatever
prepares
is
it,
required on that second floor.
we will review that. Fire department has also looked at this as well, but it's subject to all our
Just from a
building
safety
codes.
standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talk to us about the alcohol license. I mean, if you're having events, parties at night, alcohol is probably going to be part of the.
I would assume that they would get an alcohol vendor, yeah.
So it's going to have to be licensed by
Yeah.
a vendor that's licensed to do catering,
And insured.
essentially, and then
Yeah,
and
you
then
won't
they'll.
have a- you
So
won't
like
have a
McGarry's or
alcohol
the Iron.
license.
Nope.
Yep.
But we would have an umbrella policy that also covers any.
But
lack
dram
of
shop and
insurance.
stuff would be through the vendor, not the
Yeah.
owner.
Okay.
And we've already discussed, McGarry's already has that kind of licensing, so they're interested in that and also interested in catering with us. They're very interested in working with us in many ways,
That's
so.
great.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that's
Yeah, and
great.
I think that, well, I already bring a ton of business to McGarry's because every band that leaves my place is hungry. And then they want to stop at a bar and get something to eat, and that's the place I send them, so.
It's an exciting project.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Exciting for Maple Plain,
Yeah, it's been exciting for us.
especially
and-
with your attitude.
And it's a huge,
The
like,
neighborly
it's a
presence.
huge upgrade to me as well, right? Like,
Mhm.
this has
Yeah.
been an important step in my career, so.
So
And I've had
one-
First Ave guys, the manager of First Ave, he manages First Avenue, the Palace Theater, the Fitzgerald Theater, and the Fine Line, and he's been out there and he's amazed.
Mhm.
So, they literally are referring us to bands that need to come into town for when they're on tour and they need to rehearse and stuff like that. So, it's not just even just local businesses that are excited to see this happen. And, you know,
Yeah.
plus I know ungodly amount of people in the industry who have all come by and checked the place out, and everybody seems to love it, and everybody seems to think it's a good fit for where we are, so.
I think, overall, I think it's a great project. I just, one question for you, being down the street, have you noticed any noise or heard
The
anything?
noise is from the guy on the other side of me instead of.
Okay. That,
There you go.
Summer barbecues, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Noise is on the other side.
Honestly, and that's noisier,
Yeah.
and I sometimes have to, like, keep that in mind, that what's noisier is the people coming and going from my place. Because they're hey, they're all excited to be coming into the studio, and they're shouting at each other outside, and I gotta sometimes be like, hey, it's like 10:30 at night,
Yeah.
11 at night, keep it down if you would.
No,
And they're often leaving at 2 in the morning kind of thing, or whatever, because
Yeah.
we gotta fit into their schedule kind of thing, so.
I like the project. I think it's good for the city as a whole.
Yeah, I think so too, and bringing these people into this neighborhood. The biggest question I got from everybody when I moved out there is Maple where? They were like, they didn't
Yeah,
even know
we
it
all get
existed.
that.
And they do know where every town around it is.
Mhm.
They just don't know that Maple Plain exists. I jokingly call it the town that time forgot. It's just, so, but I think that's good for us, honestly. What we wanted was, I was coming out of St. Paul and kind of in the heart of St. Paul, where I had to tell people, don't leave your guitar in the car, not even for a minute, because somebody will smash your window and take it. And it's a whole lot better being out here where I can be like, oh yeah, we'll go out there and grab that after we get the, It's just a whole different feel to the place. And I think it's a feel, I know it's a feel that the musicians who work with me really appreciate. Like, they come and I get comments like, do you feel that vibe? That happens all the time, because we got the right spot and we got it in the right place.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Are you all done with the renovations of the place, or
Yes.
do you have any,
Well, for the
anything
vast
lingering?
majority, you know how
Or
that is. You're always
exterior
chasing
or anything?
The place was built in 1871, so you're always chasing something.
Mhm.
But yes, the whole place is up and running. At any given time, it might be set up for any number of things. Like, we'll set up the whole stage and set up all sorts of lighting and all sorts of everything around it, and 3 days later, it'll all be torn down, and there'll be this whole different setup set up there. So it's constantly evolving, but yes, all the renovation stuff is really, and it really looks good. Like, it really does. People come in and they're impressed.
Cool.
And I encourage you all to come by. Like I said, I encourage you all to tell everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You'll have to have an open house sometime.
Yeah, well,
There
we've
you
been
go.
meaning to, and we didn't want that to cross lines with this either.
Right.
I actually had this conversation with the former city administrator. Was like, I said, well, we want to have a party. We want to have and she's like, well, you don't want to do that before you're okayed for that. And I'm like, well, what about the art studio that's down the road? They had a grand opening party, and she's like, well, it's a gray area. And so I've been like, I'm not treading on that gray area until we get this sorted out, because I don't want to. We want to follow the rules. We want to be, a part of the community. So it's we've been waiting on that a little bit.
Yeah.
But I do think it's something that we will go forward with some sort of grand opening regardless of whether this happens, but it's just a matter of what we turn it into.
Anybody else want to speak in the audience?
Brian's my silent partner.
He's not the lead singer.
And I draw in really good talent too. I work with the best musicians, like, I really do. Like, I encourage you to check out steepleonmain.com. There's a list of former artists. If you don't find an artist in there that I've worked with that you love, then you don't love music. I've worked with the best, and in all sorts of genres. And I attract the best. I get really high caliber musicians out to my place to work.
Say one more thing. That guy's an honorable guy. Honest guy.
Yeah, I grew up in northern Minnesota, and I have small town values. I really do. I grew up outside of a small town, up between Virginia and Ely. So, it's incorporated in me to care about my communities. So, and people would say that even my ratty place that I came from in St. Paul, they would be like, he's the guy we go to in the neighborhood if there's, we need something or whatever. And I'm sure that my neighbors around you would tell you the same thing now, so.
Thank you for bringing
Yeah.
those values to Maple Plain
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
bringing your business.
I'm glad you guys were here. I'm glad this place was here. It was I'm reluctant to believe in fate, but it kind of was weird how it all came together with Jack and all of it, that we all came to the same agreement at the same time and made it happen. So that the building was even available was quite a blessing.
Wanted a church.
Yep.
That's 30 years.
Yeah,
Just happened.
indeed. He and I have been talking about opening a studio together for 30 years before this, just waiting for the right opportunity. And this came along, and it was the right opportunity, and we made it happen, so.
Nice.
And either way, we're gonna be contributing, we're sticking around, and we're contributing to this community, so.
Mark, just a clarification question. Activity center versus event center. What terminology is there that differentiates them?
The activity center can be construed by kind of common definition to be a larger, like, it can be like a district almost of a
Okay.
city or place, but it also could be an individual use. But I would classify or characterize the activity center to be a bigger
Bigger
more
facility,
expansive,
right.
yeah, facility. There's a lot of terminology in event centers. You can go from event center. I've seen small event center. I've seen agricultural event center. I've seen small rural event center. I've seen. I mean, there's a lot of terminology in planning. We would classify this under an interim use, so we're not creating a new definition per se.
Right.
But that would be what I would say. That's why I think it makes sense that we're looking at this as an interim, not as a permitted, because we just didn't feel it fit any of the permitted exact. So this kind of helps us craft what it is exactly, which the ordinance kind of gives us the ability to do, is what I think your mixed use was set up for. So
Seems like a good creative fit.
Yeah.
And we hope to be unique, right? Like, that's part of our attraction, hopefully, is that we're a unique space, you know. We're not gonna have the huge weddings, we're not gonna, you know,
Right.
there's gonna be small, private events. There's not a lot of service to that in the whole of the service industry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like it fits with the, back when we did the Maple Plain design, like the design team was here, and that road was discussed on being like small, kind of like niche businesses, and like
And sticking
this
with that
fits that.
traditional
Yeah.
look too, all of it,
Yeah.
like, we made sure and went through and accented in what would be traditional ways and all of it. We think that that's part of the charm of the place and part of the charm of Maple Plain, honestly, is that kind of small old town feel.
That gets some reference finally, right? So.
Well, you know, Pachyderm put Cannon Falls on the map, and that's a recording studio down in Cannon Falls, that, like, you know, they now are attracting legendary multinational artists coming, so definitely add something.
Yep.
Well, tell me, so I can tell my daughter when you got Taylor Swift in
You'll know. She'll come with all the
Shut down.
They won't be able to do it because it's too large of an event.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
I was hoping
She has too much entourage.
we could stay away from a Taylor
She'd exceed
Swift.
75 with entourage.
Just taking my football away.
We should close the public hearing.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, any other discussion, any other comments from the public, any?
Great job.
Okay, with that, I'm closing the public hearing. It is currently 7:14 PM. Well, you heard it all. I think we're all ready to kind of conclude and make a decision related to this, so, I think the recommendation here is really spelled out. We need a motion, to recommend approval for, Steeple on Main to, operate as an event center with the conditions as listed in the recommendation. I think that, does that kind of catch all?
Yeah, unless there was any additions, that
Right.
would be it, yeah.
I'd make that motion to approve it
Okay,
under those conditions, and adding He did promise he'd get us over there for the opening.
Yeah.
Everybody would be invited.
All right.
There we go.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Mike first and Adam seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say the same. Hearing none, the ayes have it, 6-0.
Okay, this will go to City Council on December. Where are we at?
Wow.
December 18th, I think is the Monday.
Yeah.
If I did that right? Yeah, December 18th.
That's when it would go in front of the council?
That'll go to the City Council here on December 18th for, to consider now final approval.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what time would that be?
7. Yeah.
o'clock.
And in the same room?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
We'll have a lot of hitters at that meeting, the mayor, Jacob, so.
Somebody's got to
We'll get a key.
And sincerely, you guys take my card, get a hold of me, and we'll make an appointment for you guys to come over. I don't leave the place open to the public at all times kind of thing, so it's not like you can't just walk up at any time, but give me a call and we'll make an appointment. You guys can come through and see it. I think
Okay.
you'll really be impressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when will Lizzo be there again?
Pardon?
When will Lizzo be there again?
I've worked with Lizzo.
I know, I went to your
Oh,
website.
okay. I wouldn't be allowed to tell you.
Oh.
Confidentiality is quite important in my business.
See, he's honorable. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Drive around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving right along, commission reports and then any other business. The only thing I have to point out is that they're working on the land where the villas are going to go.
Yeah.
They started doing that work, so.
Yeah, they broke ground on that. They're not going to put any structures up this year. They're getting the grading and some of the site prep work done. They're going to bring utilities fully in the spring, though.
Okay.
And then they'd go for building permits, hopefully at that time. So that one broke ground.
That was what, 2 years ago, a year and a half? That was a while.
Yeah, it was a while, and they almost came in to ask for an extension because they were running out of time and they weren't getting bids back that were that they thought were reasonable. So, but they finally did. So that's going, at least. That's a positive. We will have a planning commission next month. We got an application this week for a expansion of the. What's the Highway 12? It's the 5410 Highway 12, which is right across from the Beef Council building.
Okay.
It's that kind of office warehouse. I don't even know who's
Where
in there.
Revolve was?
No, it's where like Windsong had their offices, and then there was a dry
that
cleaner.
little strip mall type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a big warehouse in the back, and the owner, that's the primary use of that facility, and the owner wants more space, so they're going to expand the warehouse.
Gotcha.
But nice project, honestly. I've talked to them a couple of times, and they're going to move forward, so.
One other comment I would have would be that West Hennepin Police do a fabulous job with the Santa Parade.
Yep.
42 years, unbelievable. I've been here for not all of those, but a lot of them, and it's a tradition every year. And it's what a proud moment when those guys come down the road
Yep.
and you know them, you get to know them a little bit, all that kind of stuff. What a great job. They, yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. What they do, it's important to the community. I remember back, here's the stories, right? I remember, I've gone through the whole thing. My firstborn, I had him wrapped up in a whatever, standing out there,
Yep.
shivering in my tennis shoes,
Yep.
to watch that thing come through. So,
Yeah.
better weather this year, so it was great. I hope that they did well in the food drive end of it.
They did well. They
They
got
looked like they did.
Yeah, it looked like it.
1,800 pounds and
Yeah.
almost $1,000, I think, donated. They, I think this year they went to the Mound Food Pantry.
Nice.
They alternate between Delano and Mound,
Okay.
which
That's
are the
awesome.
two areas that serve our residents primarily. So,
I
but
wanna
a
have-
great turnout.
I have one observation on that. For years, forever, they've advertised it as "Come View Santa."
Mhm.
Now I got a funeral invite, and it was like written the same way.
Mm.
View. Okay? Every time I see that, "Come view Santa," it's like, how about come celebrate with Santa? Come visit Santa. It's like view Santa. That's such a weird But it has been
Mike,
that
I'll pass
way.
that on.
It's been that way.
Wording.
It's been that way.
Let 'em know
They've
that
used for years.
We don't like that
For-
terminology.
Ever.
Yeah, it's not a wake or.
Somebody's doing
Yeah.
point
Yeah,
and
no
click or
one's
something.
done
That's
it.
really
Yeah.
funny.
But Come View Santa just doesn't do it for us.
Did they find a use for that barn?
they
On
tore
the
it
villa?
down.
They tore it down.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did they end up with 5 homes going in there?
5.
Okay.
Are they townhomes?
No, they're individual homes. They'll be single family. They're calling them villa homes, but I mean those lots really accommodate. I mean,
Is it got a
'Cause it's one
separate
level.
or one level?
Yeah,
well,
level,
one
right?
or they might have like one in a bonus
Two of them
room or
have-
Sure.
something. You know, yeah.
Walkouts.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We approved 2 of them.
Yeah.
The rest of them are all.
Yeah, you're right
a
on that.
slab.
Yeah, on
Mhm.
the end. Yeah.
Cause
I
I
want-
wanted one of the walkouts.
Better talk to them.
I
For the
wonder what
pool
that
table.
barn would look like in there, at that barn.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
They tore it all down.
It's
No one
gone.
took anything of it.
Yeah.
yeah. It's a bummer.
I bet it was not
Not
salvageable
great?
because
Mm-mm.
somebody would take it.
Yeah.
I mean that's
Yeah.
pretty valuable.
Or
Yeah.
just the cost to try and move it, so. With that, if there's nothing else, I need a motion to adjourn and a second.
I make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. See y'all next month.
I
Our
will
motion.
second that.
Nick seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay.
You're in trouble if you-
Hearing the ayes have it, 6-0. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.